Johnny Football went where no freshman has ever gone. The Pac-Man got a dose of his own medicine. Greinke burned the Angels. Hamilton spurned the Rangers. A-Rod denied any association to a Minotaur, but left the Centaur door wide open. One man literally cornered the donkey cheese market, and the Lakers have... Adam, what have they done?
I don't think they've done anything.
Yeah, they haven't done much. They've imploded. Solid work, Lake Show. We'll talk about all that and more. I'm Morgan Spokny. He's Adam Toporoff, and we are proudly presented by Time Warner Cable. If you want to give us a call, the number is 877-8830-830. Once again, that's 877-8830-830. Or if you prefer to get in contact with us via Twitter, you can do so at The Spokester, at AT The Pick Machine. The offseason started really slow. The winter meetings came and went. Nothing really happened. But in the last week, a lot of dominoes fell, and in particular, the two biggest dominoes, Josh Hamilton and Zach Greinke. They're off the market, and when you look at both of these guys, clearly big signings, right? Goes without saying, Adam, right?
Without saying.
Without saying. Clearly huge signings. We're talking about a guy who got $147 million and another guy who got a mere $125.
Did they deserve it, though? That's the question.
That's the question. And when you look at the two guys, they both come with question marks, okay? And I think Greinke comes with less question marks than Hamilton, but he still comes with some question marks. When you look at Greinke, there's a lot to be said about this anxiety issue, whether it exists, whether it doesn't exist, whether it's just some sort of fabrication. But he's also never played as well as you thought he would play. The numbers don't quite back up what you think he's capable of producing outside of that 2009 season. When you look at Hamilton, there's a slew of issues. You can pick at his injury issues. He's had off-the-field antics. He's going to be 32, which is more or less past his prime years. Last year, he had tobacco withdrawals. He's had cornea issues. There are severe home road splits, and there's a possibility of a playoff disappearance. And we'll talk about all that in a minute. But first, Adam, I want to get your take. If you were to go after one of these guys, who was your man?
I think it depends on the situation. I think, especially in the Angels situation, you had to try and go for Greinke. I think they just got priced out of the market. I think that they wanted Greinke, they needed Greinke, they needed that extra pitcher to go behind Jared Weaver in the number 2 spot. They just didn't get him. The Dodgers got him, and Hamilton was a consolation prize. A great consolation prize, but a consolation prize just the same.
I agree. I think from the get-go, that was the plan. Flip the prospects, pick up Greinke, and hopefully re-sign him. And I think that was going to come to fruition, but ultimately the Dodgers stepped in. There's this looming $6 billion contract, TV deal, and somehow they just have way more money than everyone else.
Yeah, what's $147 million? Really?
Exactly. I mean, it came to that point when you have $6 billion, $147, not so much. It's all relative, and when you're flushed with that much cash, I think they simply were able to outbid the Angels.
Well, when you're giving the kind of money they're giving to guys like Shane Victorino, guys like Josh Beckett, what's a little bit more money for a guy like Zach Greinke?
So I think, obviously, the Angels wanted to pick up Zach Greinke, and as you said, the consolation prize was Josh Hamilton. Not bad.
Not
bad. The 2010 American League MVP. But he comes with some red flags, okay? So let's go through, and let's see what you're most fearful of. Are you fearful of the off-the-field issues? Are you possibly fearful of the on-the-field issues?
It's the injury situation that I'm clearly the most fearful about. The off-the-field issues, the drinking relapse that he had a couple years ago, obviously.
That can all be controlled, right?
Yes, it was an issue, though. It's something to be worried about.
It is.
But at the same time, you never know what's going to happen in this situation, but all you can do is hope that a guy like Josh Hamilton has things under control where he can produce on the field. The real issue is the injuries, something he can't control.
Right. He's only played more than 150 games one time in his career.
Yeah.
And that's an issue. It's
a huge issue when you're committing the kind of money that the Angels just committed to Josh Hamilton. When you're paying a guy like that $125 million to be in the middle of that lineup to protect Pujols, to really, especially with the pitching issues that they have right now, to really produce and bring them to the playoffs, if he's not on the field, he's not going to do it.
Right. I mean, I think if you look at the team as is, you're hoping that you outproduce the other teams. You might not be able to shut them down, but you're simply going to beat them to death with your offense.
No, this reminds me very much of some of the old Yankee teams that we saw where they just tried to score more runs than everybody else.
Or the 95 Indians.
Yeah.
A perennial powerhouse offensively, but never quite had the pitching. Now, with that said, I think the Angels are going to go after more pitching.
I think so, too. And whether it's via trade, whether it's through one of the guys still left in free agency, I think they have to go after more pitching because right now this is a team that's set up to win a lot of games in the regular season, but in the postseason, without a true number 2 starter, when you're looking at a guy like Tommy Hanson, who maybe he rebounds into that solid number 1, solid number 2 starter that you thought he was going to be coming out of the minors, but he hasn't been healthy in a year and a half. He has all the talent, but unless he's your number 3 or number 4 starter, you're really looking at trouble when you get into the playoffs, when you're looking at depth in that pitching staff. You really need to try and get another pitcher.
Right, and I agree, but it's one of those low-risk, high-reward moves.
Oh, I don't doubt that it was a good deal.
Would you make the deal?
Absolutely.
Jordan Walden for Tommy Hanson?
In a second.
100 days out of 100 days. I'd make that in a second. Clearly a good move.
Clearly a good move. I'm just saying that.
Now, is he the answer? He's not the answer.
No.
Probably not the answer.
He could be the answer.
He could be. But it's probably safe to say he's probably not the answer because he has injury concerns. And those things don't just magically disappear.
In the lease, you don't want to count on
But if
that.
he's your 4 or 5, not bad.
Not bad at
Not
all.
bad. And even if he gets injured, again, it's not a heavy investment. You didn't give up that much. To pick up a guy who just a couple of years ago was regarded as the best pitching prospect in baseball, I'd make that move. And I think when you talk about the rest of that pitching staff, I think the answer is going to come in free agency. I don't see the Angels flipping Peter Borges. I just don't see him having enough trade value at this point. I mean, last year he was terrible. He stole 2 bags last year. And I get that he's a fleet-footed, fast guy, and I get that he plays great defense, but he just hasn't proved enough offensively to be worth anything at this point.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you would flip him for, what kind of pitcher you would get for him. I don't think it would be a number 2 starter. I don't think it would be the guy that they need.
And clearly no one's going to take Vernon Wells. You're not going to get anything out of Vernon Wells.
No.
And then the question, would you trade Mark Trumbo after that bad second half last year?
Depends what you get. Honestly, I mean, if you can get a really solid starting pitcher for him, yes, I do, because I think there are serious issues with that pitching staff. When you're looking at Tommy Hanson, while, like I said, I like the deal, getting him on the team, seeing if you can do something about those health concerns, those injury issues, seeing if you can get him to perform like he did 2 years ago. But if he's your number 2, it's just not a good enough pitching staff. You can't count on that.
You really can't. So, again, as I said, I think your option's going to come in free agency. And I think that's a smart move to wait for the market to fall to you. I think you can go out and get a Kyle Loesch. You can get an Edwin Jackson. I think one of those guys are going to fall to you. And if you can do that and add Josh Hamilton, it's a pretty good offseason. Plus, you brought in Ryan Matson. You bring in Sean Burnett. Because one of the biggest Achilles heels for the Angels last year was the bullpen. They were good at times and they were terrible at times. I want to say they blew 21 games. So you won 89 games. If you would have been able to hold on to a couple of those leads, you're looking at a whole different story. A different team. Possibly you make a run in the playoffs. Possibly the pitching staff is better utilized once you get there because you had a pretty good 1, 2, 3, and 4 with Greinke. And maybe you get something from Irvin Santana. Maybe you don't. It didn't even matter at that point. But I think the dominoes would fall a little bit differently for the Angels if they could have gotten there. Now, I think when you look at Hamilton, so clearly there's some off-the-field issues. But in Texas, historically, he's batted .315. Now, at Angel Stadium, he's batted .260. And again, it's not the perfect sample size, but it's something to go on.
It's something to look at. I'm not worried about it. As I said, it's a small sample size. I think that there's no doubt that his numbers are not going to be the same in Angel Stadium as they were in Texas. I don't think anybody thinks that they're going to be the same. Obviously, the numbers were inflated coming out of Texas. But at the same time, do I think he's going to be one of the better hitters, one of the better outfielders in baseball? Yeah, I do.
And I agree. I think if he's healthy, he clearly is one of the better hitters in baseball.
I think he's clearly a around 300 average, 30 home run guy. And with that protecting Pujols with the rest of that lineup, you're talking about a serious lineup that rivals anybody else in baseball.
Yeah, and I'm just going to play, devil's advocate here and be the pessimist. But you saw how Angel Stadium and the supposed marine layer really zapped a lot of Pujols' power.
Yeah.
And I think it's safe to assume the same effect could happen to Josh Hamilton. Now, the one thing I have seen, okay, now I'm going to be the optimist here, is that he led the league in average home run distance last year.
Right.
So you have to think that what he hit last year would still fly out of the park next year.
Right. I don't think that we worry about his home runs just because they were no doubters. When you look at a guy he grades out on the 20 to 80 power scale at an 80. He has just about, other than maybe Ryan Howard, Giancarlo Stanton, he has just about the best power in the league. So I don't think we worry that he's going to hit for power. It's more about the off-the-field issues, the injuries. Those are the things that we need to talk about.
So we both kind of agree that if he stays healthy, this deal looks pretty good. Now, maybe around age 35, 36, it doesn't look so good, but that's yet to be seen.
At a 5-year deal, though, I think that it's an excellent deal. I think that maybe if he's not as productive as you like in the last year or two of this deal, you're still going to get 3 really solid years out of him. And we've seen that with contracts the way they are, you can kind of get away with it in L.A. in a big market like this. A guy maybe not producing as well as he did early in his career, making that kind of money. It doesn't hamstring you as much as you might think it would or as much as it did in other times in baseball. A la Vernon Wells, you look at that, we still had a very productive Angels team last year with Vernon Wells basically riding the bench.
Right, he might upset some fans, but the management is still able to put together a really good team, even with him in the mix.
I don't think it hamstrings you that much.
Right, it upsets the average fan because they look at that contract and say, why is that bum making all that money? But whether he makes the money or doesn't make the money, he didn't really factor into the mix at all. He was just a peripheral player. And, as I said, I think it pisses some people off, but ultimately it didn't make the Angels a worse or better team. He was just there.
If anything, you have a really good bench player.
A good bench player, right, that if you need to call on, you can call on. Now, I think, again, if you look at Hamilton, another one of the issues is how is he going to produce in the postseason, right? Because, let's say he's healthy and let's say he does produce. Can we count on him in the playoffs?
Well, there's no doubt that he shrank in the playoffs last year. It was a serious issue. He
shrank down the stretch leading into the playoffs.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. He shrank down the stretch in the middle part of the regular season, and then he kind of rebounded towards the end of the season, which is rare. You don't usually see that. Usually you see a guy who goes through a slump in the middle of the season. His season really does normally just tank that entire time. But he rebounded, he seemed to come back, and then all of a sudden, again, the playoffs started, and he looked lost at the plate.
Right. I mean, it really was a tale of two halves for him. The first half, he batted .368, killed 21 home runs. And we just talked about how the man has prodigious power. He killed those balls. He had an 1184 OPS, and that was all in April and May. So, again, if you're sitting here as an Angel fan or as a baseball fan, last year in April and May, and if you saw down the road that he's going to become an Angel, you go, oh, my God. There's no way that happens. Sign him up. Put the kid on the team. But then, if you saw the rest of the season unfold, he hit .245, but the OPS shrank down to .809. So, that's, again, if you're sitting here and you're trying to decide which side of the fence you're on, is it a good or bad move? It's a difficult situation. He's probably the biggest enigma in sports. I mean, he's capable of looking like a god. The man hit 4 home runs in a single game. But then he also shrank down the stretch. He dropped the ball. He didn't really do anything in the playoffs. He got booed by his own fans. He got ran out of town. And I think that's part of this move. I think the Angels were looking to steal arguably the Rangers' best player, and I think Hamilton also wanted to burn his previous team. He said he was going to leave the window open. He said he was going to give the Rangers a right of first refusal. It never happened. He gave him a call saying, hey, I'm going to Anaheim. Thanks for the time, guys.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I'm not in that room. I don't know what was said. But
None of us are.
Right, but at the same time, it's very possible that he just didn't think that Texas was going to offer him the 5-year deal.
He could have at least called.
He could have, but
clearly he didn't want to go back.
Maybe he was trying to spurn them. Maybe he just, from what he'd heard from Texas,
he was a jilted lover. He said, "Thanks for playing. I'm gone."
I'm not sure about that.
I can't wait to beat you next year.
It's very possible that from all the signals that Texas was sending, that they weren't going to try and give him a long-term deal, and he got one from the Angels.
Nolan Ryan belittled him. His own fans booed him.
Maybe.
I think that ship sailed.
No,
I'm clearly right here.
There's no doubt that those things happened. Did he take this deal without talking to Texas about it because he was trying to get back at them? I don't know.
I'm not saying that was 100% of the issue. Clearly factored in a little bit.
I don't know.
A little bit. Okay, but again, I want to talk about what can we expect from Josh Hamilton in the playoffs?
It's a huge question. I mean, I'd say my biggest issue about the Josh Hamilton signing is the playoff issue. Yes, you worry about the injuries. Yes, you worry about the off-the-field issues. But my real question about Josh Hamilton is what happened last year in the playoffs? And I think one of the ways you can try and explain it is people have been looking at the way players like Josh